Hello, and welcome to Unleash Monday, where we talk about the brain, especially the gifted brain, and how does it affect our thinking and experience of the world differently. There are a lot of stereotypes and stigma around giftedness, and I'm here to challenge those. I'm here to raise awareness and to have a conversation around this topic of what does it mean to be a gifted adult. Common experience among gifted folks is that they feel out of place. They don't quite fit in. They are too sensitive, too intense, too emotional, too overexcitable, and too deep thinkers about the world and about themselves. If you have been called too much of about anything, then this show is for you. My name is Nadia. I'm too loud, too colorful, too bubbly, too bossy, and love to talk too much. So welcome to my world, and I'm so happy you're here. Hello and happy Monday. I hope you had a wonderful start into the week and you're making the most of it. I'm curious, do you have a morning routine? I started about 2 weeks ago, or maybe 3 weeks now, that I consciously made a choice to start my morning with 2 hours of intentional activities such as writing morning pages. I do 20 minutes of exercise, I have a hot shower, and then I have a coffee with my partner before I then start with my day job. So I'm curious, have you developed a morning routine? And does it take a lot of effort to stick to it? I'm curious to hear. Let me know. You can find me on unleashmonday.com, or you can also comment on Instagram at unleash.monday. But before we talk more about morning routines, I think it's time for today's interview. So today I have an amazing guest. Her name is Sophia Elliott, and she's from Australia, and she's the founder and podcast host of Our Gifted Kids. And as the title says, it's targeted towards parents of gifted kids. And she's just such an amazing person. And when I interviewed her and talked to her, I just felt like we had so much in common, and I was just nodding and actually crying during the interview because I could relate so much. And it's just so interesting to hear somebody really across the globe to share so much similarities. And I'm sure I just found a new friend and we're going to be in contact. And she also interviewed me for her podcast. So if you go and have a listen at Our Gifted Kids, you at some point will stumble across the episode with me. So I hope you enjoy that as well. And I'm sure that her podcast will also give you a lot of insights and different resources. So you can find her at ourgiftedkids.com. And we also list all that we mention in the show notes. But without further ado, let's just dive in. Here's Sophia. Welcome, Sophia. I'm so excited you're here.
Thank you. I'm incredibly excited as well. It's really surreal to be talking to another person who does podcasts with gifted people. So it's great.
Yeah, it's still a very niche podcast topic, but it's really growing. And I think the more people that do it, the more we know that there's really something to it. And there's really a need for it, isn't it?
There is absolutely a need there. And I think anyone who knows they're gifted or is discovering giftedness feels that need in their very bones. But it's all those people who haven't got there yet. They've got that need, but they don't know it yet. That's the kind of exciting bit, I think, too.
Yeah, exactly. And that's also why I chose not to put the word gifted in my podcast name. And I hope to attract people that have no clue what this topic is about and then get captured and get, a little bit of information that they otherwise would never get.
100%. I love the name of your podcast, and I really had to think hard and strong about the language I use in mine as well, because that term gifted is so misunderstood and taboo as well, and provides so many challenges in terms of people understanding what it is you want to talk about, that I certainly contemplated, do I use that language, don't I? And I think I just ended up in that place going, well, it's the term we have right now. I'm going to go with it. Because in terms of parents discovering that their children are gifted, it's going to come up. So let's have that conversation about the misunderstandings, I think. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So between you and me, we're kind of getting them from both angles.
Perfect. Yes. And that's great. Well, because we're going to be on each other's show. And so people can really hear from both angles.
Absolutely.
So, but before we get started, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and how did you get into this topic of giftedness and gifted children, especially?
Yeah, it's not somewhere I ever thought I would be and not somewhere I ever anticipated. And it is a bit surreal. So, my name is Sophia, and I host our Gifted Kids podcast. And we have obviously a website as well. And my mission is to provide support and information for parents. And as a part of that, I'm a real collaborator, and I always have been. And as a parent myself, I wanted to talk to other people who worked in this gifted zone. And so our Gifted Kids is all about bringing people together. The parents, who are in themselves most likely gifted adults, the teachers, the academics, the experts, the psychologists. Like, there are people out there working with gifted children and who understand gifted people. But what I found when I first started on this journey was they're really hard to find. And I want to make it easier to find all of those people and find the help that parents need, because I want to help parents on that journey of parenting gifted kids, because it's not as simple and straightforward as the term gifted makes it seem. It's actually quite challenging. Yeah.
Do you want to share a little bit about your personal story? I think you have 3 gifted children.
That's right, I do. I have 3 gifted children. And when my eldest was 5, he was in reception, which is the year before school starts here. Or it's kind of the first year of schooling. And he has always been this very delightful child. And when you have your first kid, you don't know anything else. Like, I don't have a big extended family with lots of little kids around. My child was probably the first baby I had held. And I think a lot of parents these days, when you have your first, it's really all you know. So when he hit 5 and he's halfway through reception, this first kind of year of starting school, he got angry, he got frustrated, he got depressed, he got very sad. It was not him at all. It was very distressing. And of course, as parents, you're desperate to figure out what is going on. And a friend of mine who is a teacher trained in the UK said, like, he's gifted, right? And I was just like, I don't know what that is. No, I didn't. Is this something? Tell me more. And she sent me a few links. The characteristics, I think, is where people often start. And I looked down that list and I was like, yeah, tick, 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 tick. I'm like, maybe there's something behind this that we need to investigate. And because we didn't really know what else to do, we ended up getting a psychological assessment for him, imagining that it would give us some information. And of course, feeling as though, yeah, he was a bright kid and they would confirm that he was a bright kid, but never in my life anticipating that we would sit there with the psychologist and, she said, your son is gifted. And in my 20 years as a psychologist, I've really only seen a few kids like him, because he scored very highly across the board. And to be gifted, of course, within that assessments process, you would only need to score that highly in one or more areas. So he's a bit unusual in that respect. And we just kind of laughed, that kind of hysterical, slightly manic laugh that you do when you don't really
know what to do.
I know. It's like, I don't know what else to do. I'm just going to laugh here. And so, she talked at length about the report, and it just was a wealth of information and very overwhelming. And then on the drive home, my husband and I are just trying to digest what is incredibly surreal. There's no other word for it. It was just a surreal turn of events that we were not expecting. And we continued to laugh maniacally on the way home and also cry on the way home because it suddenly was very overwhelming and very unknown. And so that started our journey on the gifted thing. And we had to fight for him. As many parents do, they have to advocate for their children to get the educational environment they require, because they do require something different to what is typical. And we were very lucky, very, very lucky that here in Adelaide, there is a school for gifted children called Dara School. It's only 4 years old. And at the time, it was only in its second year. And at that point, it wasn't an overly impressive looking school. It is now that it's moved, but it was sharing a couple of rooms within another bigger school. So it really just had these 2 rooms, and the kids were in one and the admin were in the other, and there were about 26 kids there. But when we met the principal, I immediately thought, like, this woman knows what she's doing. She really understands my son. And what I really liked her was it was very clear that they did nothing just because that's the way it's done. Like, everything was on the table for discussion and creative interpretation. That really appealed to me. So we took this kind of leap with this new school. He's been there for 2.5 years and has thrived. It's moved into this lovely premises of its own, which is actually this gorgeous heritage building. And there's now 60 students at that school, and it has continued to grow because the demand is there. Our gifted kids need a different environment. And so that, of course, led us to our second child, who actually had a severe, and then still gets speech therapy, a severe speech impairment. And so her journey was quite different and looked quite different, but we had to get a psychological assessment to get her into a kindy or a kindergarten, which is the year before school starts here, that specialised in language development. But it had to be their only kind of quirk. And so this psychological assessment actually said, well, she was gifted too. And so she is now at Dara with her big brother. And my youngest is 4. He goes to kindy this year. We will go through that journey with him and see what that uncovers. But we do anticipate he is just the same as his brother and sister, if not hitting milestones earlier than them, which in itself is a little bit scary. It's kind of like, well, what do we have here? And he's quite cheeky. They're all very different. My eldest is the science buff, and he's very about rules. And science is his thing. He's very good at science, scary kind of good. My middle child is a creative thinker. She's completely different. She comes at things from a completely different place. And my youngest is a little bit of both. He's definitely cheeky. He's got a wicked sense of humor, and just from day dot has always got the joke, like always got the joke. And I think there's a little maybe budding engineer in there or something, because he really likes things and the way they work and stuff. So that's another adventure. So that's kind of how I got started. And as I went through my own journey, I realized it was very challenging, and there wasn't a lot out there, and it was misunderstood. And for me, I just got to the point where, like, this is not okay. I'm not okay with this. And I just thought, I'm going to use my kind of skills and experience that I have to try and bring people together to help parents parent their gifted children, and also raise that awareness, like yourself, about giftedness, so that our broader community understands it better, and so that we have more educational options for gifted kids, because this is not a small number of kids. Statistically, it's 10% of our children requiring, an education that is going to be a little bit different, or at least recognition. And the higher up you go, the more specialized, I guess, the education is required because they're so asynchronous, they don't fit. So that's very much how I got started, and my motivation from that kind of deep-seated sense of this isn't right.
Yeah, the feeling of like we need to change something and advocate for the people that don't know or cannot for themselves, right? And so going through this journey with your three kids, and I love that you already highlighted that they're all different in themselves, which again is interesting and typical, right? So you don't have this one specific, we have this stereotype of the gifted kid, but this is just this stereotype. And when you said, all of your kids are so different, but they're all gifted. So going through your journey with your kids, could you also relate yourself? Do you also know about yourself? Are you one of us too? Like, or didn't you go down that road? Or may I ask this very personal question?
Oh, absolutely. Well, yeah. When you go that deep into I just kind of dove into all the research I could find, and initially I was propelled to learn and understand my children, but of course, I think first of all I thought, oh, this actually sounds like my brother. I could see the parallels with my brother, and then little by little I learned to recognize that actually some of this stuff is about me too. And you can't help it when you read things or you experience things, and it just makes your life make sense. It's all those times I sat in a meeting with a bunch of folk thinking, can't they see the connections here? And now I realize, well, actually probably not, because I have come to realize that I'm really good at seeing connections in things. And, and I love on your website, you talk about being a multi-potential, because I now recognize myself as, a generalist with that ability to be very flexible in what I'm doing. And I always had that throughout my career. And I don't think I ever really appreciated it. So in my 20s, I worked in politics, and I was a policy advisor for a minister at the state government level. And I started out in the environment portfolio in admin, and I worked my way up to become assistant policy advisor and then policy advisor in this very political role, even though I had a degree in visual arts, as in fine arts. And so I went through environment. Then this particular minister I worked for moved to justice. And so I moved with him to justice. I became assistant policy advisor there. And I was the only one there who was not a lawyer, let alone me and my fine arts degree. But I just learnt the content. I recognize now that what I brought to that role was problem solving, seeing things from many perspectives, and the political analysis, I think, because I was very involved in politics. And at the time, I didn't have that confidence. I didn't know that about myself. And then we moved to the education. And again, I just learnt the content, and I didn't think much of it because I always had this confidence that, well, one, I could learn whatever I needed to learn. It's just information. But two, there's always people there to ask. And I've always been that person who will learn from every single person around me, whether they're an admin officer or, a head honcho in the department or a bureaucrat. I didn't care. I would learn from them and ask questions. And so, learning all this stuff about my children, I started to think, maybe this makes sense for me. But then there's a part of me that likes data. And like, I don't have the data. I've never done an IQ test. I've never had any assessment. Like, not sure if I'm comfortable calling myself gifted if I don't have the data, which is ridiculous probably. But so, when my daughter once asked me, she's like, Mummy, well, we're gifted. Are you gifted? And I said, well, I recognize that my brain works differently from other people. And I look at things differently like you do. I said, but I haven't had the assessments yet, so we don't know for sure. Because I just couldn't grapple with the fact that I didn't have facts or figures about it. So I think that actually maybe makes me more gifted. I don't know.
It does. I love this. I love this. It's such a beautiful example, right? And this is where, because there seems to be a genetic component, and gifted adults usually learn about their own giftedness through the journey of their kids. And because they then recognize themselves like you do. And that's why I asked this question, because I really want to advocate for the adults. And when you don't have children, you might never get this experience. And the fact that you then doubted yourself and like, oh, I don't want to call it that without the data. Like, it's so typical. And it goes along with all the friends I talk to and myself. And that's why I really like Paula Prober's approach with the rainforest mind, where she said people don't want to call themselves gifted, but if you compare it to the rainforest mind, it's easier to get in there. But she still calls it gifted because, as you said, this is the vocabulary. And also when I talked to Jennifer, she was saying if we create synonyms and whole new word, it's still what it is. And let's just own the term and start fighting the stereotypes and all these negative annotations. But for oneself, it is always so difficult, isn't it? It's easier to fight for somebody else, to advocate for your kids, than advocate for yourself.
Oh, 100%. Like, I'll meet people or, parents of kids that I know, and they'll be like, I'm not gifted. I'll be like, you are so gifted. Oh my God, you're gifted. But for me to say that about myself, I'm like, oh, hang on, I need a bit of data first. Yeah, right. So I know, yeah. So it's an interesting journey. And I think it's, for a parent of gifted kids, it's imperative, because we're wanting to teach our kids to know themselves. And how can we do that if we don't know ourselves? We are, they're a mirror to us. So we need to see, ironically, and acknowledge that as I am on the journey too, and help them to recognize that in themselves. Because some parents will say, well, did you tell your child that they're gifted? Have you had that conversation? I'm not sure about telling them. And I just respond with, they already know that they're different. Believe me, they've figured that out. In the schoolyard, they feel it already that they're gifted. So give them a language and an understanding so that they know that their difference and that their feeling in their heart from those peers around them isn't seen as I'm broken, and it isn't seen that there's something wrong with me, but actually is seen for what it is, that actually my brain just works differently, and that's okay, and I'm okay, and they're okay. But now they have a language for something that they've always known and felt.
Yeah, and it's funny. So I only learned about my own giftedness in May 2020. So it's only been a couple of months. And it was quite a shock. And then going through my life, like reflecting on my life and how this probably, it's like a red thread through my life of what I've experienced. And now it makes sense. And then I thought, oh, but if my quality of life would have probably been better at the time as a child if I knew. And so I thought, okay, I need to create this podcast for gifted adults who don't know. But then I started talking to people that had been evaluated as kids and were actually identified as gifted. And then here in Switzerland, I don't know, maybe there were or there are some gifted schools. At the time when my friends went to school, they basically were just told, oh, here's some extra work. They got busy work. They got like excuse from certain topics. Like they didn't have to be mentally present. They could do something else because they already mastered the curriculum. But nobody told them that this will impact their adult life, that this impacts every aspect. It's not just that they're a quick learner or good at math or good at drawing, but it really goes really through your whole personality, the sensitivity, the imposter syndrome, the perfectionism, and then the procrastination, and all of that comes in like, so I had one person come to me and in a team setting and was telling me how she had difficulties within the team. And when she was talking, I said, well, this is a gifted issue. and and I asked her, may I ask you, have you ever had an assessment? She's like, yeah, my IQ is 143. And I was like, well, there you go.
There you go.
There you go. And so, but she never learned that, she never had this support or coaching during school years. So that's why I'm really curious to know, is that something you're advocating for, the school that your kids go through? Is it really something, it's just the academic enrichment, or is there really, like, I don't know, call it life coaching?
It absolutely is something that I advocate for, and I think is essential because, like you say, being gifted isn't just, oh, I learn things faster. It's I experience the world differently. I perceive the world differently. And there are challenges, that the sensitivity that you referred to and that tendency to be very intense or anxious. A lot of gifted adults that I know have some struggles socially, fitting in or feeling belonging. And I think it's essential that we have these conversations. And like you, I know a lot of people who were clearly identified as students in their younger years, but were never told what that was about or never realized. And now they're like, oh, that is why I did all those classes and stuff. But no one ever said. And actually, I don't even think my parents realized. So I definitely think we need to be better at having these conversations, because if we look at giftedness like any neurological divergence, it's often put in the same bucket as autism and ADHD and those experiences that are neurologically different. Like, you're experiencing the world differently, and we need to understand why that is the case. It's not all about, oh, your kid's gifted, oh, you must be so lucky and have it so easy. They're going to breeze through school and just get A's and be that poster person for success. And it's like, well, actually, that's not the case at all. And I think it's essential we have those conversations and acknowledge that as adults as well. Like you say, it can and will change the way you see yourself and experience the world. I know a lot of adults who not only have gone on this journey of their kids are gifted and kind of going, oh, maybe that's me, but also being assessed as adults with ADHD or autism, and suddenly, their life making sense for the better. And so I think it's essential. And the kids' school is very much about the social and emotional growth. And of course, they're wanting to meet all of the children at whatever stage they're at. So academically, they assess before every term in the specific subject that they're studying to make sure they're learning at the right level. So a class might contain someone who is 6, someone who's 8, someone who's 5, and they might all be doing, I don't know, grade 4 math or something, because they're all asynchronous. But the real mission behind it is to ensure that socially and emotionally all those children are getting what they need, learning how to fail at things, because that's obviously a big thing. And we recognize that as gifted adults, we don't want to fail anything. So it can be harder to take risks and to do things that we don't feel comfortable in. So we're trying to teach our children those skills from an early age. So, I think absolutely essential conversation to have. Yeah.
So if parents around the globe, I mean, you're lucky you have this school close by. If parents are listening and are looking for a school for their children, do you have any advice, like what to look for? And if there's not a specific school designed for the gifted, is there anything parents can do to support their gifted kids outside of school?
Yes, there's a few questions there. And first of all, I would give parents permission. Anyone listening, I give you permission to be that parent. You know, especially if you've had the assessment, you've got that piece of paper in your hand and it's telling you that your child needs enrichment or acceleration or something different. I give you that permission to go up to those schools and have that conversation with them. And if you can't find that at the school that you're at, you may need to look at finding another school. And this is very much the situation that we were in. We went back to the school with our report, which had all sorts of suggestions in it. It was very clear about what we were dealing with. And they refused to enrich, refused to accelerate. They just refused. And I still can't understand that. Like, I just can't. And since then, I actually know a whole bunch of gifted kids that have left that school. And that, I think, speaks to the lack of understanding and the lack of priority given to teaching teachers about what giftedness is all about. So I don't blame any of those teachers. I blame the system that didn't educate them to understand what they were dealing with, because I truly believe they just didn't know what they were dealing with. They just didn't know what to do. And that's not uncommon. And if I talk to people even from different countries, I know that that is not uncommon. That is not just here in Australia. Unfortunately, that's a global phenomenon. We're not dealing with or educating our teachers on what to look for to identify gifted kids, or how to understand them, or what giftedness is all about. And so even if there are gifted programs or enrichment, you might get told, yeah, we have this program, but that child hasn't been behaving and they've got to do this other work to do that as a reward. Well, I'm sorry, but it's not a reward. It's that child's right to learn at the stage that they need to learn at, and they're obviously not doing that other work because they're bored out of their brain, and it's not right for them, and it's not the right way to learn. So I give parents permission to be very, very upfront and say, my child is gifted. This report says we need this. What can you do? And I had to go find a school for my second child, because this was before she kind of moved to the other school, the gifted school. And we weren't quite sure at that stage what was required, because all gifted kids are different. Not all gifted kids are going to need a specialised gifted school. Some gifted kids are going to do quite well at a school with a really good gifted program. So I went to at least half a dozen different schools in my area, and I asked them all the same question. I said, do you have any gifted kids at your school? And it was really interesting to hear their response. One principal said, yes, we do. I said, are they assessed as gifted, or just do you know that they're different? And she said, well, we've got one who's assessed, but we've got a few others that gifted but not assessed. I said, okay, do you have a gifted program? She said, no, we don't, but we learn in this particular way at this school, so we support them in this way. Another principal I spoke to, I said, do you have any gifted children at this school? And he said, our children have many gifts. And I just sort of thought that, that's not what I asked you. I'm like, yeah, point blank, all children are a blessing and they are gifts. And we all have strengths and weaknesses, but that is not the same as being gifted. And so I did the tour, but we didn't go to that school because he was not talking the same language as me. And as far as I was concerned, that may have been a very nice school for a child who was typical, but that proved to me that there was a lack of understanding about what giftedness was. And I think as a parent, you need to be brave, and you need to not be afraid to ask the question and to just keep looking till you find it. But it is hard. I recognize and have gone through that experience. It is very hard. And yeah, you fingers crossed within the schools you go to, you will find the best possible fit for your child, because it's tricky. There's just not enough services, and you will have some programs, but they'll only take 50 kids. I'm like, well, what about the other gifted kids? Like there's thousands of them out there. Yeah, so we need to do better, quite frankly. So parents, be brave. I give you permission to be that parent, and ask those challenging questions. And if they say, right, well, yes, we do, or no, we don't, well, the next question might be, well, do you have any teachers here with a master's in giftedness? Because that's the qualification here in Australia. They don't learn about it in undergrad. You've actually got to do a master's. So you would expect someone who is running a program for gifted kids might have that. And I think it's okay to ask about the qualifications and the understanding, because the other thing that schools will do is they'll say, oh, we don't use the term gifted. We've got high achievers. And I've had this conversation as well with a school, saying, oh, we have high achievers. We don't use the word gifted. And if a child is good in English, then we have once a week an hour where they do an hour of extension with the deputy principal of this particular school, which is like enrichment. And that's all well and good, but what does that child do the rest of the week? And that might suit some gifted kids, but it certainly wasn't appropriate for mine. And it might not be for most, but what I struggle with in that scenario is this idea that, well, we'll do an hour a week. It's like, well, what, is my child supposed to just be bored for the rest of the week? You know, we need that acknowledgement that this is 24/7. And like you say, they're going to carry this into adulthood. So what are we teaching them at childhood? That they're not entitled, enough, worthy, you know, they don't deserve to have their needs met. So, and that's not okay.
Yeah, I hear a lot of gifted adults say when they describe their childhood in one word is waiting.
Oh, isn't that sad though?
That's so sad. Yeah.
It is, you know, like before I started this, I had 4 years at home when my kids were young. So we moved to Adelaide when I was pregnant with my second child. I had been working and we moved here, and it's like, well, I was huge. I was like 6 months pregnant. I was like, it's probably not any point getting a job at this stage. And then I had my third. So I ended up being at home with the kids for 4 years, which was very challenging, I'm happy to admit. Challenging to focus my brain on just being there and not having 6 projects on the go. And so I would often, you know, renovate the house when I was 7 months pregnant with my third and get involved in volunteers, because I just kind of needed to fill my brain with more things. Not that parenting isn't more than enough, and I recognize that now. I wish I'd kind of known myself better in those early days, because I would have just kind of seen it for what it was and coped with that a whole lot better, right? But yeah, so when I returned to work, like many women do, it's very difficult to find something that works with your children. So I took a job just for the sake of having a job, and I thought I might be able to work my way up. Anyway, it ended up being a bit of a disaster for me because I just couldn't cope. I relate it very much to how my son must have felt when he was 5 at this school, not being able to cope. And I totally get that now. Like, I really that resonates with me. I was not doing well at all, and I ended up quitting. And it was when I quit, it was like, okay, what am I going to do with myself now that I'm having to make some serious decisions? And I had 2 ideas. I was very interested in gender equity and was thinking maybe I should do a PhD in that, because I had a way of looking at that I thought needed to be explored, because I did an MBA when I was doing politics, just because my fine art degree wasn't sufficient. So I have the fine arts degree on one side of the brain and the MBA on the other side of the brain. And I thought maybe I should do a PhD in gender equity. And I met with a couple of unis, and probably thankfully, I didn't feel like I belonged. They came across as a bit snooty because I didn't have the research, quite frankly. And I thought, oh, I can totally do this. And I know I can do this. Like, you know, it was a real strong, like, but I can do this. You know,
I'm laughing over here because a couple of minutes ago, you were still doubting if you're one of the gifted adults. And now you're saying, oh,
I know.
I wish you could hear it from my side. And I hope when you listen to yourself for my interview,
I recognize the irony. I swear I do. I know. I totally see that. And the other interest, though, this will make you laugh even more. My other interest, intense interest, was the circular economy, which at that point had very little traction here in Australia. So I'm like, I could be a consultant in that and really, because it's important to me to impact change, which is why I worked in politics and then for a couple of charities. However, what actually ended up calling me was doing this. And at the end of the day, I just felt like I felt that incredible pressure and overwhelming, intense state of the world and the state of our climate change. And I was like, what can I do about this? Because I have to do something, of course. And I ended up, it was very much an intuitive leap. It came out of nowhere, but it felt 100% right. And once I felt it, I couldn't ignore it. And it was to help parents of gifted kids so that the gifted kids could know themselves and walk their truth and their path. And so that parents of gifted kids could also learn to know themselves, realize that actually we're not broken. We can be brave and confident and resilient in walking our own truths, and we can help our children to walk that path. And in doing that, I mean, if we had a planet full of people walking their own truth, doing what they loved, well, then we're going to have change. And so that was my inspiration to do Our Gifted Kids, is to try and just help people see themselves, be seen, belong, be brave to be that person.
I love this. Thank you so much for sharing all of this. I'm actually here crying because I can relate so much with the gender and the circular economy. And I feel like you're just giving back my own thoughts and my process and my thinking. And like, oh, maybe I should do a PhD. And then, but there's so many interesting fields. And then now doing this because it's needed and it's important, as you said. Yeah. Oh, this is amazing. So where can people find you?
They can find me on the Our Gifted Kids podcast, which is on all those places that you find podcasts. Our website is ourgiftedkids.com, and we're on Facebook, of course, and we have a group for parents. And I have to say, like, we're just getting started. Like, this is going to be a big party. And I'm really excited about what is happening over the next 12 months and what's going to happen over the next few years. And I'm really excited about bringing in people like yourself to talk about this issue and have these conversations. And I just think there's so much knowledge out there. I want to just bring it all into this place for parents to make parenting easier and to create that community that I have been very lucky to have here in Adelaide with my children's school. I wanted to replicate that as a place of belonging, because we all need somewhere to belong and feel like we're seen and heard and okay just as we are. That kind of line from Bridget Jones, I think, was, yeah, I like you just as you are. That's it. Like, let's be that. Let's have that place. Yeah.
As we close, is there anything else you would like to share, or is there anything you wish parents or adults knew about this topic, or is there anything you wish you knew earlier?
Oh, that's such a big question.
Can talk another hour about this.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch. Okay, parents, you don't have to do this alone. You don't have to do this alone. That's what I want you to know. There are a lot of people out there like you, and adults out there listening. You don't have to do this alone. You've got people like Naja and all the people that she finds and other gifted people out there. And, the crazy thing is there's this huge taboo about being a parent of a gifted kid. Like, you can't just say that stuff. Like, you just can't, because people look at you like you're just all sorts of things that aren't pleasant, right? And as I have had to say out loud over the last 12 months, well, I'm a parent of 3 gifted kids, and I'm doing this thing to support parents of gifted kids. And at first, those words came out like I had to drag those words out. And I like, it took me 12 months of practicing having to say that. But I tell you what, every time I said that, every single time I had to fess up in some environment and say that, someone said, usually in private after, not in public, I have to say, but always without fail, someone would say, actually, my kids are gifted. Or actually, oh, there was this thing, I think I'm gifted. Can we have a coffee? Or, oh, my grandkid's gifted. Or like, we're not talking, those people aren't talking about it, but everyone's out there having these experiences. And it's really funny the minute you open your mouth. I was really nervous when I first started going live on Facebook and talking about this because I'm like, oh my God, I really got to get over that. And I'm doing this now. I was like, what are you doing, Sophia? But I just kind of jumped in as I do with things. And again, the comments I would get, the personal messages I was getting, I had a friend say to me that she's like, I never post stuff about my kids being gifted or even share anything about being gifted on Facebook. But she said, you know what? I thought if Sophia can go live and say that, the least I can do is share it. I'm like, go you. But that's how bad the taboo is about this. That's not okay. It's just not. It's not. Because within that taboo, we're telling all these kids that they're not okay. And that's not the truth. Yeah. So you're not alone. There's more out there. This is a conversation that we need to have.
For sure. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing. And of course, we're going to stay in touch because I feel we're so similar, living on separate continents, but having the similar experience. So thank you so much, Sophia, for being here.
I'm absolutely delighted to thank you for the invite. And I feel like we're going to catch up and be like, right, where are you at? Where are we all at now? So I'm looking forward to chatting again in the future and seeing where you're up to now. So thanks. Yeah, it's been wonderful.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Wow. I'm still speechless, and I'm so happy that Sophia reached out to me and we had this amazing conversation. And I just learned so much new things, and it gave me more insight into the gifted topic of children. But also, it's so interesting how a lot of people can see giftedness in other adults and in their children or in their relatives. But it's so hard to actually take this for your own and embrace it and say, yes, I'm also part of the gifted community. And obviously, as Sophia was mentioning at the end, right, as a parent, for her, as an advocate and with her podcast, it was so difficult in the beginning to say, I'm a parent of 3 gifted children. And for me as well, like I'm standing here saying, I'm a gifted person, but it's not something that you normally say. And I do this because I really want to create awareness of this topic because I had no idea what giftedness in adults mean. Like I had 0 clue of this topic. I never even thought that this was something that applied to me. I had the stereotypes and I had this, let's say, I actually never really thought about this topic until my friend shared her story with me. And I went down this path and I was like, wow, this needs to change. We really need to talk about this. And it empowers people. It really helps people get a better sense of who they are and that there's nothing wrong with them, and just helping them navigate through life and also finding a community and finding like-minded people. So it's really important to know who you are. And that is so powerful. So that's why I am doing this. And that's why I am taking all my courage and saying that I am a gifted adult, even though it does feel strange and I do feel like an imposter and I'm still at times doubting this myself. So be gentle with yourself, and I hope you enjoy this show. And if you do like this episode, if you do like the podcast, it would really mean a lot if you subscribe. If you listen on Apple Podcast, please leave a review. You can give me 5 stars. And if you scroll all the way to the bottom, you can actually leave a written review. This really would mean a lot because the more reviews, the more stars I get, the more visibility the podcast gets, and more people will actually learn about this topic. So that's why I'm encouraging you to like, subscribe, share, and leave a comment. So thank you so much for your time, for your interest. I'm curious to hear more. If you want to connect with me at unleashmonday.com or on Instagram at unleash.monday. I'm also now on Twitter and on Clubhouse and on LinkedIn. So I'm trying all the channels. So wherever you find me, you can leave a like or a comment so I see that's where you at, because I have no clue which social media platform my listener actually using so that I can share the best articles and the latest episodes with you. So this is it from me for today, and I'm looking forward to speaking to you, and I see you in 2 weeks. Bye!